An article in the American Foreign Affairs magazine provided the context to how the United States war on terrorism post 9/11 had normalized the idea that everything is permissible in the pursuit of terrorists, regardless of where they are. The question of sovereignty of another nation where these terrorists may be hiding out was not paramount anymore. Now, the magazine writes, to prosecute its war in Gaza, Israel borrows ethos, strategy, and tactics from that framework, doing so with the support of the United States. That support, worth $3.3 billion annual aid, and the additional billions of dollars since October 7, 2023, constitute complicity in the genocide of over 30,000 Palestinians, mostly women and children. This is what the Foreign Affairs magazine wrote about how the United States had encouraged pursuit of terrorists in quotes. This exceptionalism of the United States in favor of an aggressor and occupier, that is Israel, not only contravenes the ideals set out in the United Nations-led world order post-1945, but also exposes the duplicity of geopolitics. It has seen the pumping of hundreds of billions of dollars into various wars: Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia, Yemen, Ukraine, to name a few, in the name of countering terrorism and promoting democracy. The third consecutive veto that the United States used against the Security Council resolution on the Gaza ceasefire on February the 20th also reflected the same exceptionalism in favor of Israel and marked another blow to the global rule of law and human rights regime the West at large has long championed. This situation begs a big question in the current turbulence. Should the rest of the world look on as geopolitically driven exceptionalism wreaks havoc across the globe, or embrace the concept of a shared community of humankind based on equality, inclusion, and collaboration as proposed by China's President Xi Jinping? President Xi proposed the concept in his address to the Central Conference on Foreign Affairs in Beijing in December 2023, while spelling out the challenges for Chinese foreign diplomacy in a world beset with turbulence, choppy waters, and conflicts. President Xi's proposal also appears to be driven by frustration over failure of the current UN-based world order in protecting fundamental rights of smaller and oppressed nations such as the Palestinians. Continued unqualified support for Ukraine and Israel only ensure more conflict and greater human losses with the active support of the country that speaks the loudest on morality and human rights. All this happens, interestingly, in the name of responsibility for shared security, as late President Ronald Reagan had once said when defending continuous arms and funds aid to Israel. Every US president ever since, including the incumbent Joe Biden, has upheld this pledge to protect Israel at the cost of justice and humanitarianism in the world, defying the ideals behind the birth of the United Nations in 1945. Interestingly, a June 2023 US Congressional Research Service report lists at least 71 instances wherein the United States used or deployed military force in different parts of the world. Military force in different parts of the world, at least 71 instances in the last 4-5 decades. It also includes instances of invasion of other countries in the name of self-defense. Afghanistan, Iraq, and some African countries, Yemen, Somalia, as is the case currently. Now, the unconditional support to the brutal Israeli aggression against Palestinians, of course, is part of the unilateral exceptionalism that the US invokes when necessary. In this crucial and disturbing context, President Xi, while addressing the Central Conference on Foreign Affairs in Beijing in December last year, reviewed the global political environment and spelled out the challenges for his country's diplomacy. He called for an equal and orderly multipolar world in which all countries, regardless of size, are treated as equals. Hegemonism and power politics are rejected, and democracy is truly promoted in international relations. As the leader of an ascendant global economic power, which now also feels responsible for steering the world away from the consequences of Cold War geopolitics, the Chinese president proposes the building of a community with a shared future for mankind. That is, perusal of goals of common development, lasting peace, and security. President Xi also recalled how his country had risen as a confident, self-reliant, open, and inclusive major country with a global vision. The launch of or agreements for infrastructure projects in dozens of Asian and African countries under the Belt and Road Initiative and the establishment of the Asian Infrastructure Development Bank are some examples of how the Chinese government, the Chinese leadership wants to pursue the goal of peace and economic development across the world. Belt and Road Initiative and the Asian Infrastructure Development Bank are indeed the pronounced examples of how China under President Xi Jinping has reached out not only to its neighborhood but also the countries beyond for inclusive economic collaboration and joint security architecture against all sorts of threats. The Chinese leadership considers this as the foundation for a shared community based on win-win economic cooperation and trade connectivity, and not through coercion and selective dole-outs to preferred countries. In the current case, it's Israel and Ukraine. This also stems from the belief that critical problems involving more than one country, big or small, need a holistic approach by big countries such as China and the United States to push for peaceful coexistence, overall stability, and balanced economic and trade development. How do we solve the questions of what kind of world to build based on the understanding of the laws governing the development of mankind? This goal President Xi has set for himself seemed to be the core tenet of his thoughts. Theoretically, and going by what the founding fathers of the United Nations had agreed on, it is imperative to uphold fundamental principles, reject all acts of power politics, stop bullying, and vigorously defend national interests, given the fractures and turbulence in various parts of the world. Is that possible? Is it conceivable? Well, now that the ideals set out by the United Nations are reeling under geopolitics, the world is also witnessing unprecedented erosion of the rule of law. Can the global community embrace President Xi's ideals for a peaceful and cooperative world based on mutual respect, justice, and inclusion, rather than stoking fires of conflict out of sheer self or bloc interests? And it's not just about the shared community or shared humankind. And these ideas did not pop up in isolation. When COVID-19 was ravaging the world, President Xi had proposed a global development initiative at the September 2021 United Nations General Assembly. She followed this up with his global security initiative at the Boao Forum in April 2022. In March 2021, President had introduced his Global Civilization Initiative to counter increasing polarization, rising intolerance across the world, structural racism, abuse of power, and the rise of right-wing forces in political spectrums across the world. The primary driver of all these initiatives is to create a world order where all can jointly eliminate the root causes of international conflicts, improve global security, improve governance, and bring more stability and justice to all the nations. So in a nutshell, why not, as President Xi proposes, pursue peace and development through mutual respect, non-interference, win-win and inclusive cooperation for creating a shared community of humankind. Thank you.